She stood proud in her white suit, ready to unveil her community fountain, built right on his land. She hit the switch, and was instantly blasted with a torrent of raw sewage. The crowd screamed. She froze in place, drenched in filth. What happened next? You won't believe it. But let's start from the beginning. They destroyed my roses. For what? Michael Torres had always believed that a man's yard was an extension of his soul. After retiring from the Navy, he'd poured over a decade of his life into perfecting his rose garden. He wasn't just planting flowers. He was building peace, one bloom at a time. Each rose had a story. Queen Elizabeth's for his late wife's favorite color, peace, roses to remind him of what he fought for. It wasn't just a garden. It was memory, therapy, and sanctuary rolled into one. So imagine his confusion when he pulled into his driveway on a Thursday afternoon and saw a construction backhoe parked in the middle of his lawn. Mud was everywhere. Deep tire tracks ran straight through the soil beds. And where his carefully arranged rose rows once stood, nothing. Just a churned-up mess of splinters, petals, and roots. Michael sat frozen behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel like it could anchor him to reality. His heart pounded. He thought, is this the wrong house? That illusion shattered the moment he saw her. Karen Wilkes, the self-appointed queen of their HOA. Slim, sharp-eyed, dressed like she was auditioning for a real estate reality show. She was standing on his porch, clipboard in hand, chatting casually with two construction workers. Michael stepped out of his truck slowly, like someone approaching a car wreck. "Karen," he said, voice tight. "What the hell happened to my garden?" Karen turned around with a smug little smile, like she'd been expecting this moment all day. "Oh, Michael, great news," she beamed. "The board approved a beautification project. We're installing a decorative community fountain. Your lawn was selected as the ideal location." He blinked. "You what?" "We sent out notices last week. Didn't you get the email?" Her voice oozed condescension. "Anyway, the contractor said the roses were in the way. But don't worry. We'll reimburse you for the plants, maybe even a new mailbox." Michael felt like the world was tilting. His stomach dropped. He tried to process what she was saying, that his yard had been chosen without his consent for their project, that the garden he built with his own two hands had been sacrificed for some tacky neighborhood fountain. He stepped closer, pointing at the wreckage. "This was my property, my work. You had no right." Karen cut him off, her tone sharp now. "Actually, under the HOA's revised landscape guidelines, the front-facing portion of your yard falls under communal visual interest, which means we do have a say, and the majority voted to move forward. This is about progress, Michael, about community." That word echoed in his head. Community. As if the neighborhood needed a plastic water-spewing monument more than they needed respect for personal boundaries. Neighbors walked by across the street. Some gave him sympathetic glances. Others avoided his gaze entirely. One even said, quietly, "Didn't know they were starting today." They knew. Everyone knew, and no one told him. No one stood up. No one questioned Karen. That night, Michael didn't sleep. He sat on his porch in the dark, watching the workers finish setting the concrete basin. His garden was gone, buried under a project he never agreed to. And Karen? She had the audacity to wave at him from her porch across the cul-de-sac, sipping wine like she'd just hosted a successful bake sale. His hands shook, not from fear, from rage. This wasn't just about roses anymore. You don't touch a man's soil. The next HOA meeting was packed tighter than usual. Folding chairs lined the stuffy, beige-walled community hall, and the air buzzed with a mix of idle chatter and passive discontent. Karen Wilkes, as always, sat at the head table like it was a throne, flanked by her loyal board. 3 yes-men with clipboards and zero backbone. Michael sat in the third row, not out of choice. His usual seat was taken. He noticed it was now reserved for a landscaping contractor Karen had recently befriended. Coincidence? Not a chance. Karen opened the meeting with her signature plastic smile. "Thank you all for coming. We're so excited to continue with Phase 2 of our Community Enhancement Plan, the installation of the Wilkes Serenity Fountain." That name hit Michael like a punch to the chest. Wilkes Serenity Fountain? So it wasn't even about the community. It was a monument to herself, a legacy project built on someone else's property. His. He raised his hand. Karen saw it. She ignored it. He stood up. "I wasn't informed about any of this," he said. "No notice, no vote. You destroyed my property without consent." Karen didn't even look flustered. She tapped her gavel. "Michael, please. We sent the proposal out in our monthly email. It passed with a 5-2 board vote." "I never got that email." "You should check your spam folder," she replied sweetly. "Or maybe set up email forwarding properly. It's not our fault if homeowners don't keep up." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Nervous ones, the kind people make when they don't want to be associated with the guy causing trouble. Michael clenched his jaw. "You uprooted my garden. That's destruction of private property." Karen leaned forward. "Front yards are considered semi-public visual zones under HOA Code 6.4.2 that gives the board discretionary authority over their design. You were simply behind the times." Behind the times. The words burned like acid. His roses were behind the times? The garden he'd cultivated with purpose and care? Dated? The meeting rolled on. Karen presented slides of the new fountain. Modern, minimalist, reflective, she called it. There was even a plaque already drafted. "In honor of service and serenity, the Wilkes Fountain." Michael felt the room closing in. He watched neighbors nod along, too scared or too beaten down to speak. A couple across the aisle whispered about how the old guy really overreacted. Another man muttered, "It's just flowers." They didn't get it. It wasn't just flowers. It was about choice, respect, control. Karen had built an empire on silence. She didn't rule with iron. She ruled with paper. Citations, fines, HOA violations that appeared out of nowhere if you spoke up too loud. And slowly, Michael realized something. He wasn't the only one she'd done this to. The woman next door, Claire, once had a handmade wooden porch swing, until Karen ordered it removed for being a safety hazard. Mr. Patel had planted fruit trees in his yard. Karen cited them for pest attraction and made him cut them down. Even the holiday lights last year had a 3-day limit, per community aesthetics. It all clicked. This wasn't about order. It was about control. Karen had weaponized the HOA, turning it into her personal kingdom. And most people were too tired or too polite to fight back. But Michael? He wasn't tired. He wasn't polite anymore. He walked out of that meeting with one thought burning in his chest. If she wanted a fountain so bad, she was going to get one she'd never forget. She wanted a fountain? I gave her one. After that meeting, Michael Torres wasn't just angry. He was awakened. He stopped watering what was left of his garden. Let the soil harden. Let the grass yellow. It didn't matter anymore. His sanctuary was gone, and something colder had taken root in its place. Every morning he sat on his porch with a notepad, not to write poetry or catalog bloom times, but to watch, to listen, to map the rhythm of the workers, what equipment they used, where they stored the tools, how the pipes ran from the street and into the base of the fountain. Karen didn't notice. She waved from across the cul-de-sac like everything was normal, like the Rose Massacre had never happened. She even had the gall to bring him a peace offering, a fake lavender candle and a smug little card that read, "Sometimes change is hard, but it brings beauty." He didn't even open it, just dropped it into the trash like the rest of her garbage. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Michael wasn't planning a complaint. He was planning a counterstrike. He made his first call to Dale Wexler, old Navy buddy, now head of maintenance at the city's Public Utilities Division. They hadn't spoken in years, but one, "Hey, Chief, I need a schematic favor," was all it took. A few days later, Dale slid him an envelope over beers at an empty bar on Route 9. "Just don't tell me what it's for," Dale said, sipping his Coors. "But if something backfires on Wilkes, buy me dinner." Inside, a complete underground utility map of the neighborhood, and right there, like fate itself had intervened. The fountain's installation spot was located directly above the main sewage line, complete with an unused, capped access valve. Michael stared at the diagram for a long time, the corners of his mouth twitching. "Perfect," he muttered. The next step was subtle groundwork. He couldn't afford suspicion. The workers came during the day, but Michael started making irrigation improvements in the evenings, digging small trenches, pretending to test water pressure. He even planted a few fake PVC caps near the front yard to look like he was just another retired guy with a lawn obsession. Then came the pipe fittings, 2 fake lines to throw them off, 1 hidden valve behind his garage, and finally, the connector, a rugged industrial bypass he bought off a contractor's forum meant for emergency overflow management. By the end of the second week, the system was ready. The Wilkes Serenity Fountain, with all its fancy granite and LED lighting, would not be fed by clean city water. No. It would be drinking directly from the darkest place in town, the pressurized, untreated sewage main. All he had to do was wait. And Karen, in her infinite arrogance, made it easy. She sent out invitations to the fountain's unveiling, flyers posted to every door, local press, even a string quartet. Memorial Day at noon, to celebrate community, vision, and leadership. Michael circled the date on his calendar with a red Sharpie. He spent the night before the ceremony tightening every bolt, checking every seal, rehearsing every step. No leaks, no loose ends. Then he stood on his porch in the dark, watching the wind rustle the HOA's patriotic bunting. Somewhere across the street, Karen was probably rehearsing her speech in front of a mirror, admiring herself. He exhaled, long and slow. "She wanted a fountain?" he whispered. "She's gonna get baptized in it." The baptism of Karen Memorial Day came hot and bright, the kind of day that screamed barbecues and baseball. But on Maple Ridge Drive, all eyes were on the fountain. The cul-de-sac had been turned into a makeshift festival. Red, white, and blue streamers fluttered in the breeze. Folding chairs stretched in neat rows across the lawn. A rental podium stood front and center, draped in a velvet cloth. Children ran around holding balloon animals, and a photographer from the local paper adjusted his lens. In the middle of it all, the fountain, granite base, polished silver spout, embedded LED lights around the rim. A gold plaque screwed in beneath the basin read, "Wilkes Serenity Fountain, in honor of visionary leadership." Michael stood off to the side, wearing his old Navy ball cap, arms crossed. He hadn't said a word to anyone, just nodded politely, hands behind his back, like a veteran attending a parade he didn't believe in anymore. He knew the moment was coming. His modified valve sat primed in the back of his shed, ready to divert flow with one simple twist of a handle. Karen stepped up to the podium like royalty. Dressed in a blinding white pantsuit, pearls at her neck, hair coiffed to suburban perfection. She smiled to the crowd like she'd just won a Lifetime Achievement Award. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice oozing self-satisfaction. "This fountain represents more than beauty. It stands for progress, for vision, for unity. And I hope—" A loud whisper from the crowd. "Just turn it on already." Karen laughed. All right, she cooed. "Let's welcome the next chapter of our neighborhood's legacy." 3, 2, 1. She pressed the brass button on the pedestal. A rumble, a whine of internal pressure, and then the fountain exploded. Not in sparks, not in mist, but in a geyser of raw sewage. Thick, brown, pressurized sludge shot 10 feet into the air, then crashed down like a wet bomb. The crowd screamed. Some bolted, others froze in horror. The quartet dropped their instruments and ran for cover. Karen didn't move in time. The first wave slammed into her chest, soaking her pristine white blazer. Her scream was drowned by the sound of gurgling muck hitting pavement. A second blast caught her full in the face, knocking her backwards into the grass. She flailed like she'd been dropped into hell, arms flapping, heels slipping, hair now a dripping mess of what could only be described as karmic justice. People gasped, some laughed, others gagged. Michael stood still. Then he smiled. It took 15 minutes to shut the fountain down. The HOA tried to cover it up, claimed it was a mechanical error. But a viral video posted by a teenager across the street, titled "Karen Gets Baptized in Poo Water," hit 2 million views in 48 hours. By the end of the week, Karen resigned from the HOA for personal reasons. The fountain was removed, quietly, at night. The plaque mysteriously disappeared. No one ever asked Michael if he was behind it. No one had to. They started waving at him again, offering coffee, helping him replant his garden. He never bragged, never gloated. But one evening, Claire from next door left a small sign in his yard. It was simple, painted wood, handwritten letters. My yard, my rules. Michael just nodded, sipping iced tea on his porch as the sun dipped low. He didn't need a speech. He'd already said everything that mattered, with pipes and pressure.